The Dreamer by Nicole Abbey, Chapter 7. Notes. First contact with aristocracy. A Duke Charles Dubois would make an interesting case study. Manner and dress exceedingly pleasing. Cursory study reveals subject's affable yet complex personality inordinately engaging to researcher. Witness similar reaction in general population. Captain only exception. Disputes hypothesis. Explanation non-forthcoming. Side note. Researcher experienced inordinate pleasure for title and hierarchy despite democratic upbringing. Intriguing. Customs and atmosphere affecting, despite efforts at indifference, the standard protocol for researcher-subject relationship. I leaned over the bow of the ship, watching the land slowly approach as we bobbed up and down on the waves. It seemed we were going tremendously fast, with something like shore as a marker. England. I turned to my notes that I held in my grip and struggled against the wind as it attempted to take them from me. As I scribbled on the paper, my hair repeatedly blew into my face, blocking my vision, and I had to continually brush it away. I shall learn to fashion my hair according to the mode of the day, Captain. It'll not do for me to... I looked up and found that he had moved down the deck and was speaking to Finley. I went to him, notes and all, riding along the way. I stood behind him, finishing a sentence, and when he turned, he bumped into me. He cursed, then asked if I was hurt. You always ask that, I said complacently, and I always say no. If I'm always trampling you, it's because you're always underfoot. I looked up, frowning. You told me to stay close, didn't you? I'm only obeying orders. I am busy and simply don't have time for your nonsense today. He turned to leave. I regarded him critically. Captain, I sense anxiety. Is there a reason for this? I am not anxious, he told me, but he still avoided my gaze. Of course you are. Look at you, you're not. What is causing so much apprehension? It started when... I looked around and saw his eyes on the distant shore. It started when land came into view. My eyes narrowed when he swung on me. Is it the approach of land? Is that it? What is the problem, Captain? Don't you like shore? You are mistaken, Rachel, as usual. I'm pretty sure I'm right, Captain. You should have seen the look on your face when I said it. You looked startled and a little afraid. I think I'm right. Yet I don't know what you should be apprehensive about. I should think you'd be relieved to be finished after a long journey, to finally return home and be able to rest. You certainly don't act like the ship is your favorite place. So why should you be unhappy to find it come to an end? He looked out to sea, ignoring me now. But I wasn't fooled. His ears were perked, his posture defensive. I thought about it. It can't be because you'll miss your crew. You aren't exactly on the best of terms with them. And Finley is a permanent fixture in your life, so it can't be that. You've no family on the other side of the ocean, and you're at home here. You are clearly English. So I wonder, if you'll allow me a psychological evaluation, it would... He suddenly turned on me. Would you stop talking like that? He demanded. I blinked in surprise. There you go again. You're unintelligible. You speak as though you're not even human. Like you're just studying us from afar. You changed for a while, and I hoped... He stopped momentarily and then shook his head. But here you are once more, worse than ever. I opened my mouth, but the words came with difficulty. I was simply trying to understand. I shook my head. The captain's eyes widened, and I knew he regretted his outburst. His hands rose as though he were attempting to ward off an unpredictable beast. Forget I said it, Rachel, he begged. Speak however you wish. For heaven's sake, just don't weep. I laughed. Captain, I wasn't going to weep. He lowered his hands and he leaned back. Oh, of course not. I don't know why I said it. Why do you say it like that? I asked. Like what? Like it's humorous. Well, isn't it? I don't see why, I said. Women do cry, particularly in this century. Yes, he said, but not you. There was silence. And I turned and I looked out at the sea. My notes flapped in the wind, but they were safe in my grip, and they did not escape me. Without looking at him, I said casually, "You say that a lot, that I'm strange and different from other women. Would you prefer if I were more like the women you know?" "Heavens, no!" I laughed. "Well, why not? You just told me I was unintelligible." "Yes, well, I don't understand most women." He shook his head as he looked out at the ocean. "I ran into a beehive once when I was a boy. The bees flew around my face, sharp and stinging and too quick to swat away. That's what women are like, especially when they talk. Little and fragile and terribly dangerous. I just don't know how to defend myself against something so small and unpredictable." I was silent. He didn't look at me, his face turned away. I couldn't even see his profile. His posture was relaxed, but I could tell it was deliberate. "Do you feel that way about me?" I asked quietly. He frowned thoughtfully and shook his head. "It is true you speak quickly like other women, and I very seldom understand you either. But you are different. Your tone, your expression, it's almost masculine." "Masculine?" "Yes, you aren't shocked or offended by our seafaring ways. In fact, sometimes you hardly seem aware of us at all. I suspect you view us more as useful instruments than actual men." "And this pleases you?" I asked in horror. "Oh, I prefer it. You are sound, understandable, sane, not prone to cruelty or flights into fantasy." His words had a certain heavy weight. I looked out at the horizon. There was a story there, but instinct told me not to pry any further. However, I could not quite feel comfortable. Masculine? He thought I was masculine? I looked at him out of the corner of my eye, a frown on my face. The first thing that hit me when we got to Port Gunther was the odor. It covered the land like an invisible barrier that knocked one to the floor when one drew too close. It's true some of the sailors on the ship smelled, but with the wind constantly blowing and fresh swimming water always available, it was nothing like the shore. And the dirt, coal dust and grime covered everything from the streets to the stray animals. Raw sewage lay in the gutters, and one had to traverse the streets with strict caution. We had to board a longboat to get to port. The ship, the captain explained, sat too low in the water to get very close to shore, and many of the men stayed aboard the ship, including Mr. Finley. They would remain there until the cargo was unloaded and counted. Gunther was a bustle of activity, and we were nearly swamped with people as soon as we touched our feet to the earth. Beggars asking for money, merchants selling wares and food, and prostitutes selling, well, even for a modern woman, it was all rather shocking. The captain took me by the elbow and pulled me through the throng and hailed a passing coach. As I stared around me in awe, on the way a small child, a girl with dirty gold curls, held out her hand and said, "Tuppence, Captain?" And the captain called her by name and gave her a coin. He helped me step into the rickety contraption, and I felt it would tumble or collapse at any moment. There were 2 benches, one on either side of the small cabin, and I chose one arbitrarily. The captain followed me in and sat opposite me. The carriage jerked into motion. "Is the plight of the peasant inundated throughout the continent, or is it restricted to this port?" I asked him. "Are the other cities affected as much as this? Are there no assistance programs? Where do the people in need find food and shelter? What is law enforcement like in this area?" The captain's brows came down in the way I knew meant he was concerned, though he looked angry. "The watchmen and constables are corrupt, and the poor are oppressed and forgotten." My eyes widened. "I have read about this, I think," I suddenly exclaimed. "The government is corrupt here, and in 1730... I stopped myself and looked at him. "Yes, in 1730? he asked. I looked out the window and said, "Oh, nothing, forget it." The truth was, In 1730 there is a revolt. The poor barricade the town, and the militia are sent in to arrest them. There is a battle, and much of the town is destroyed. Many old historical buildings are lost. Perhaps after the treasure is found, I might do something here. I heard the heavy ringing of bells, and I stuck my head out the window in time to see a small bricked church, complete with a white steeple reaching up into heaven. It was humble and unremarkable, but it seemed significant somehow, and I drew back into the carriage thoughtfully. I looked at the captain, and I said lightly, "Finley's afraid he's going to hell to pay for all the things he's done wrong, all his sins." "I know," he answered noncommittally. The bells stopped their ringing as I watched him. "What do you believe, Captain?" "I think he's too hard on himself," he said. "Yet you don't trust him." "Oh, I know his weakness. I don't deny he is imperfect, but he's done a lot of things right, too. I'll never forget what he did for me." "For you?" "Yes, he raised me," he answered shortly, "and stayed with me when I ventured on my own." "He raised you? What do you mean?" "I mean he raised me after my parents died." I could only shake my head. "Finley was a pirate? How is it even possible? He is so nervous and weak. How could he choose such a daring, dangerous job for his career?" The captain shrugged. He had been an orphan, too. Grew up in workhouses. He and my father met on a ship and became friends, and he followed my father. I watched him carefully as he spoke. "How is it you never turned to piracy, raised by them, even born of them, as you were?" He shook his head. "I don't know. I just couldn't." But it would have been perfectly reasonable for you to turn that direction, considering your upbringing." "Just because it's reasonable doesn't make it right," he replied dryly. The church bells began to ring again. They had a pleasant tone, light and engaging, like a simple, pretty song. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To the merchants? To the ship owner? Will we take inventory soon?" "First, we're going to the dress shop to get you something decent to wear before I take you to Lady Alistair." "Who's she?" I asked. "Friend of my mother's. I stayed with her while I was in Cambridge." "You went to Cambridge, Captain?" I asked. "For a short while, yes," he answered. He gazed out the window. "Why only a brief period?" "It was an unsuccessful venture," he answered succinctly. I, who was a tremendous success with university life, could not grasp this. "Unsuccessful? How?" "Some are made for university life and others are not." I was thoughtful. "I suppose it would be difficult for a boy raised on a ship by pirates to adjust to the confines and routines of rigid educational life. I suppose you felt you were imprisoned." "Something like that." "Do sailors often go to school?" "The high-born." "How did you go, then?" "Lady Alistair arranged it." "What was your ultimate goal in your education, or was it merely a personal inclination?" I looked for my pencil. "You touch those notes," he said, "and I will tear them to shreds, child." With wide eyes, I left them where they lay. He had used the tone he saved for the men when he was disciplining them. Everyone obeyed him when he used that tone. I leaned back in the seat, and I watched the 18th century world go by. It was astonishing how quickly one can acclimate to any circumstances. It felt as though I already belonged here, even though I could not have been more an alien to it. A thought occurred to me. "You stayed in touch with this Lady Alcester over the years?" "Alistair." "Well, have you?" I asked. There was a pause. "No." "And you are taking me to her now? Why?" "She'll know what to do with you." I looked down at my dress, and I said, "My dress is unsuitable for this Lady Alistair?" "Of course." "Why is that?" the captain exclaimed. "Don't you know anything of fashion? It is over 30 years old." "Oh, then it is no longer fashionable?" He clenched his fist and put it to his forehead. "No more questions, Rachel, please." I turned and gazed out the window at the women passing in the street. They wore wide skirts, mostly in pastel colors, with lace caps. Silhouettes were widening at this time, transitioning from the narrow, open skirts of the 17th century. My skirt, I noticed, was narrow and open down the front. "What will you tell her? How will we explain things?" I asked without thinking. But he didn't answer. He just continued to look out the window, his shoulders tense. "Captain, what will we explain to Lady Alistair?" "I don't know, Rachel!" he nearly shouted. I was quiet, pressing my lips together, growing rather sick of being barked at. Finally, the carriage stopped and we alighted. The shop was small and so crowded with wares I wondered if it was possible to turn in a circle. We found a shopkeeper behind the counter helping 3 young women. By the height of their white wigs and the overwhelming aroma of their perfume, I guessed they were wealthy. The women turned at our arrival. Their makeup, to my eyes, looked clownish. White, powdered faces, black beauty spots, and red lips. Their smiles inexplicably froze on their faces when they saw us, and I thought one of them silently mouthed the words, "the equestrian." Their business evidently was at an end. Money changed hands, and the women backed up but did not leave the store. They politely bobbed their heads, their eyes on the captain, giving him plenty of room to approach the counter, which he did. "I need a dress," he harshly told the shopkeeper, an elderly man with a bald head and dim eyes. He gestured at me. There was a gasp, and I turned and saw one of the girls with a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide and horrified. He turned to the girls. "Would you quit staring? Heaven forbid you give your sordid little mind a rest." When he turned back to the shopkeeper, the girls cautiously backed away until they reached the door, and then they turned and hurried off. I looked up at the captain, searching his face. It was set and withdrawn, and any camaraderie that we had between us was now gone. He determinedly avoided my gaze. He slapped his hand on the counter, making the shopkeeper flinch. "Well?" he demanded. The old man looked at the captain resentfully. "Mr. Tucker, one of those girls was the daughter of Viscount Hilchurch. Another was the daughter of an earl." "So?" the captain bit at him. The shopkeeper took a step back and said kindly, considering the words, "Forgive me, Captain Tucker. I'm afraid I shall have to ask you to leave. It'll not do to have you running off me monthly customers for the sake of one order. You'll have to find somewhere else, I'm afraid." The captain's face, which was already flushed, turned a brighter shade of crimson. Without a word or look to me, he turned on his heel and he stomped out. I looked curiously at the shopkeeper, and then I followed him. He hailed a coach and nearly tossed me up into it. He bit out a new direction and climbed in after me. When he sat, he looked out the window and said nothing. I watched him carefully, at how pronounced the vein in his forehead, and how low and ominous his brow. After some moments of stony silence, he bit through his teeth. "You women are the most—" He turned to me suddenly and exploded. "Now you know why I hate coming ashore. It is infested with simpering, judgmental, overdressed, and undereducated women. Give me a crew of cutthroat miscreants any day." I shrank at his vicious tone, a throbbing blood vessel at work on his neck. No one had ever spoken to me like that. I had the urge to demand the coach stop so that I could escape him. I sympathized with those idiotic girls. However, he was a fascinating case study. He intrigued me, though I didn't quite know why. I knew I liked to study him, and I also knew that if I could at last uncover and dissect him, it would be very gratifying. Though I didn't reach for my notes. Shamefully, I didn't even think about them. I hesitated. Only momentarily, but I did hesitate. I was not afraid, per se, but like an experienced herpetologist handling a poisonous snake, caution was naturally prudent. I arose and joined him on the other side of the carriage, keeping my eyes on him. He had turned back to the window and didn't look at me, but I knew he was aware of me. In fact, almost imperceptibly, he shifted in his seat, giving me room. The situation is clear, Captain, I explained, peering at him. It is all so simple. Your manners, though appropriate and necessary in the open ocean, are naturally unpleasant and off-putting on land when left unchecked. People get offended, and you, in your mortification, react with anger, making yourself even more offensive. It is a vicious cycle and very elementary. I put my hand on his sleeve. Is it possible you haven't realized this before? He turned and looked down at me. What on earth are you saying? He grumbled. I could already perceive that some of the stress was gone from him, and that he only spoke harshly in an attempt to disguise his dawning relief. I told him with a laugh, I completely agree that such insular people are hardly worth troubling over, and I could fully appreciate the urge to offend their narrow minds further. But really, we are counterproductive when we do so, aren't we? I smiled. He watched me soberly, and then in a move that surprised me, he turned his wrist and clasped my hand hard in his own. It gave me confidence to continue. The solution is clear, I said. The way lies before us, wide and straight and even. How is it that you didn't see? You must squelch this desire to punish the land dwellers for their small-minded arrogance and adjust your approach. This helps in so many ways. It pleases them and allows us to get what we need from them. I laughed. It suddenly seemed very funny. If you could have seen their faces as they so stealthily made their escape behind your back, as though you might lock the door to hold them prisoner. He shook his head. Strange, strange child. You've never been afraid of me. The little space of the coach seemed to shrink around me, and there didn't seem to be enough room for both of us. Never, Captain, I said. He nodded and gave my hand a pat and looked out the window again. We rode on wordlessly, but instead of tense, stony silence, it was with an air of contemplation. These people are priceless, I said with a contented sigh. It will be such a delight to me to study them. The coach stopped at a similar-looking shop, and once again we alighted. No, Captain, don't barge through the door, I cried, stopping him. It startled them before. Here, let me take your arm. Doing so will naturally slow you down. No, Captain, no, that won't do. Clear your brow. There. No need to approach them as though marching into battle. I suddenly laughed, poking his ribs with my elbow. We've play-acted before, haven't we? Except now our roles are reversed. Laugh with me, Captain. You're very shrewd about everything at sea, and the shore's no different. Easier, in fact. I've been stabbed. You can certainly face a few apprehensive stares. He laughed reluctantly. There, perfect. Now in we go. We entered. Behind the counter this time was a middle-aged, big-busted woman with pins in her hair. She looked up, a smile on her face, but when her eyes fell on the captain, her smile disappeared. With an indistinctive yelp, she turned and fled out of sight to the back of the room. Minutes later, an older man appeared, nervously pulling at his vest and clearing his throat. Why, Captain, what a surprise! What can we do for you? Smile, I whispered through my teeth. We approached the counter. Good day, it's Mr. Franklin, isn't it? That is your name on the sign? The captain began. He was cut short by the jingle of the bell on the door when someone entered. We turned. Suddenly before me was the loveliest-looking man I'd ever seen.